Hey everybody, Clint Kendrick here with another episode of the Master Your Merger video blog. I spent the last month talking about all of the reports that have come out from the big consulting firms on M&A in the first half of 2025. So if you haven't caught the first three in the series, please go take a listen because that'll probably help with this number 4, the last one in the series, which is really about what we can learn from private equity. Every acquirer, not just private equity, teaching private equity, but what PEs can teach all of us about how to do deals better. So if you're like most M&A leaders, you think of day one as the finish line, right? The deal's signed, the press release is out, and then the hard work begins. But private equity firms, they don't look at day one as the end. They see it as the starting gate for an exit. And that mindset is something that every buyer, whether strategic or financial, can really learn from. Because if you're not thinking like a seller when you do your integration, you are probably leaving money, talent, and growth on the table. So let's talk about how private equity does it different. So Deloitte in their report outlines 3 specific levers PE firms use to create value quickly. So first, HR strategy. They align their leadership to the deal thesis. The second is org design, and that's where they really structure for execution. And then third, they look at rewards and incentives, and that's how you tie compensation to value creation. So in other words, PE firms are already designing the post-close organization to perform at exit, typically 3 to 5 years into the future. KPMG also highlights how PE sponsors are prioritizing things like organizational agility. So if you want to go back and hear more about agility, I talked about that in last week, week 3 of this series. They're also talking about the speed building teams that can scale fast, pivot fast, and respond to market shifts fast, all without chaos. And so that means by the time the deal closes, the private equity team has already mapped the leadership team. They've defined reporting lines. They've designed the top comp plans, and they've set the KPIs that'll really tell the story at exit. This isn't a reactive approach. It's an intentional, proactive approach. And it's why we tend to see that PE integrations tend to move a little faster and cleaner than what we see with some of the strategics. Okay, so let's compare that to some of the strategics. And honestly, that's where I've spent most of my career. And a lot of strategics are really open to learning from the private equities. But there's also an understanding, look, a strategic is usually buying for a different reason than a PE firm. It's not just about the financial return. It's usually about the long-term horizon that the strategic has. We're not necessarily going to pick up all of those tools, but there are a lot that we probably should be. Strategics typically close the deal and then start asking questions like, who owns what? Do we really need to keep this team? How do we align titles and pay? What does success really look like? And that delay has a cost. I think about it with offer letters. Most strategic firms, people don't get offer letters until, 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks after the deal has been closed. And so during that time, do you know how much talent you can lose? Fortunately, I'm seeing a shift where more and more strategics are doing those offers earlier to line up with what a lot of PE does when they're doing these buys. So anyway, Bain and PwC both report that when integration is treated as an afterthought, organizations see a bunch of leadership misalignment. They see talent loss. They see synergy delays. They see cross-functional confusion. And here's the real problem. Strategics, we typically inherit messy organizational structures. There are overlapping roles, there's unclear authorities, there's a lot of legacy systems, and it can take 6 to 12 months to clean that up. And during that 6 to 12 months, there's a ton of friction, there's lost momentum, and your leadership team is really distracted. You're not building value, you're firefighting. Now, PE firms, they're not waiting. They're cleaning it up before day one. So here's the good news is you don't have to be a PE firm to use the PE playbook. And when I talk to the strategics that are doing this really well, including fortunately some of the strategics that I've worked for in my career, they do things like PEs in a couple of ways. So first, they'll treat day one more like a product launch than a handoff. So they've aligned that leadership in advance. They've built the messaging to employees early, and they've locked in the org chart and the authority model before the deal closes. So when that deal gets announced on day one, they already know what's going on. And then between the day the deal gets announced and the deal gets closed, of course, assuming it's not a simultaneous sign and close, they're doing things like cleaning up titles and roles. They're flagging underperformers and flight risks. And they're also setting those expectations for performance. And then finally, the strategics that do this well are designing for flexibility. And that's because the organization you need right now may not be the organization that you need a year from now. And I would say, as we're seeing AI really flood the market and getting adopted more and more, that's more true now than it ever has been. You've got to design these organizations for flexibility. So even if you're never planning to sell the business, you're going to fully integrate it, you're going to deploy those people to different teams, you'll still eventually need it to grow and to scale, or possibly transition to other parts of your organization. And when that day comes, strategics, you'll be glad you treated integration like an investment and not an afterthought. Okay, so if this resonates with you, if this is something you're like, yeah, this makes a ton of sense, I want to invite you to come join me at the People Synergy Summit. That's going to be September 16th and 17th this year. And if you're watching this after the summit because you got it late, that's okay. We do a couple of these a year. So we're going to have sessions this year that will cover these kinds of topics, specifically around leadership, specifically around culture, specifically around total rewards. So we're going to talk about how you can do that. And you can take that information and really learn how you can design organizations that scale exits smoothly. So whether you're with a PE firm, a portco, a strategic, the summit is built to help you integrate faster, smarter, and more intentionally. And in case I didn't mention it already, virtual attendance completely free. Completely free. No reason not to come hang out with us. So here's your takeaway. If you want to drive value through integration and not in spite of it, let's take a page from the private equity playbook. Design your org for the next owner, even if that owner's you. Okay, and don't forget to register for the People Synergy Summit at peoplesynergysummit.com. Okay, we'll see you next week.